Yeah, so I want to welcome everybody to the LSR Division 5 meeting here. And I'm sorry, hard to multitask here, so just spotlighting me here. Anyway, want to welcome everybody to it. And we got Duane Richardson presenting tonight on craftsman structures. And this is going to be kind of a preview to a clinic that he's doing at the convention in Temple, regional convention in Temple coming up. So this ought to be cool to see kind of work out the bugs with him on this. So, but I just want to let y'all know, just remind everybody with the convention coming up in Temple, the early registration has stopped. The deadline was April 1st on that, but you can still register for that. So that should be a fun convention to attend. And of course, we have the national convention in St. Louis in August coming up, and then August next year we'll have it in Grapevine. And then we're up there with the team doing a meeting through the venue. Pretty nice venue, so that one ought to be a really great one to do, especially with all the prototype tours and layout tours that are up in the area up there. So just mark that on your calendar. That'll be great. So before we get to the clinic, does anybody have any show and tell or anything they want to talk about? Just mention, like what you're working on, anything like that. I'll open the floor up to people.
Hey, Brooks.
Yeah.
I drove the Golden Spike on the main line.
Oh, cool.
So the brass track is gone. I am now all hand laid track all the way around, about 230 or 40 feet. And so I'm up to about 900 feet of hand laid track and about 45 switches.
Oh, that's great. So you got a complete loop now.
Hand laid switches?
Yeah, I do them in place.
Okay, so I'm going to assume here you've got a turnout, then you have a crossover to go from. You got two switches basically facing back to back.
Two switches facing back to back. Yeah, I got that.
Okay. If you've got a third piece of track work, you've got enough there to qualify for civil if you do a few drawings.
You got a diamond.
There you go. That'll work.
Yeah.
This now makes about 100 of these scratch built ones that I've done on 3 layouts over the last 30 years.
Just got to do the paperwork.
Yep.
John just needs a little bit of help with paperwork. He's not good with paperwork.
I think that's the thing with everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I was doing the math on it here the other day. I got the national AP report in, and we've got MMR number 703 and maybe 704 now. It took from 1961 to 2007 to get to 391 when I got mine. And then just since 2007 to now, we've almost doubled it. And it says a lot about how much it's being promoted, how many the modelers are really getting into this now and realizing what a boom it really is for their skill set. And it is a lot of paperwork, but it will make you a better modeler. And I do guarantee it. If you've got any questions about the paperwork or whatever, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm more than happy to talk with you all about it.
Yep, Duane is the regional AP chairman too, so he's the guy to go talk to about that.
I'm the guy that's going to look at all your paperwork.
Yep. So I saw that Joe Lysing just joined us. I'd like to call on him and if he's got anything to add about the convention that I just mentioned, if he wants to add anything. I guess not. So anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not a problem. I was just wanting to see if you had anything to add on the regional convention coming up since I saw you just joined.
Yeah, well, good to be here. Last time I talked with Bob down in Syntex, host for the 2022 convention, they still had some operating slots available. So if you want to get involved in that, operate on some layouts that you might not be familiar with, drop them a line. Obviously, Mr. Speed over there is going to be doing a make and take, and you need to make advance arrangements to make sure that you have the right materials for that. There will actually be a e-blast going out concerning that with the information in more detail. And bottom line is, if you haven't registered yet, folks, we're 2 weeks out. You don't want to miss it. All right. So go to lsr2022.org and sign up, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody there.
All right. Thank you. Well, with that, does anybody else have anything to talk about going on in their hobbies or one-to-one railroading, anything? So, okay. Go ahead.
I'd like to curse Jeff Palmer.
Why is that?
He put on a 2-part clinic for us about making roads. And one of the topics, or part of the topic, was bar ditches, and used for drainage and whatnot. So I had my layout going, and making some progress on my roadways, and then I got to thinking about what Jeff said, and he's created a whole nother project for me. Digging up the top of my layout so I can put these bar ditches in. So I'm hoping it'll be a nice detail, but it ended up being a project in its own right. So
Yep. Some of those are wraps, especially when you get into 3D printing them. I'm on this diorama that I'm working on. I'm started printing some little storm grates in there. I've got to change some of the supports because the little corners didn't come out right, but yeah, of course, those kind of details are actually what makes a scene believable or not too. So even though they are important, especially if you want to better your modeling skills.
Oh yeah, and I tell you, Mike Mackey, I was over at his house the one day, and I asked him, can you 3D print some manhole covers for me? And he did. And asked me, what size do you need? And I hadn't really thought about it. And so he printed up what I asked for. And then on the drive home, I was amazed by the variances in the size of manhole covers. And mine are excellent for a tractor trailer driving over the top of it, but maybe not realistic for what we see all the time. So I guess it's really a matter of observation. Take a look at what's out there, and ultimately you'll get a more realistic presentation on your layout.
Well, and one of the things that you might look for is for a resource is if I can type it up, see if they have anything. If you look for municipal castings, my family owned an iron foundry, and that's kind of the stuff that we made. We sold everything to East Jordan Ironworks in Michigan back in '98. But you should be able to go to some of these companies. Yeah, like I'm looking at East Jordan, their website's ejco.com. And then they have like all storm grates, manhole covers, lids and rings. And of course you could probably go on there and actually just look for, if you're 3D printing them, get the pattern. There's different things for sewer, electrical, telephone. I know some of the ones we made as a company, some municipalities had certain designs and logos on there. Like for stormwater, they had like fishes jumping out of a river, things like that. And I know we did some for I want to say Southwestern Bell or GTE back when it was those, and they had a really cool hexagon pattern on the top. So that's a good source. And then you can on there you could see the size. I know some were like 36 and 42 inch. But yeah, there's different sizes for different applications. So yeah, that's something to look into. And I was actually looking through the back catalog that I have all the CAD drawings from our the product line that we had, but they're not in 3D. They're just 2D drawings, and it's amazing like how many different grates there are. I was looking through these storm grates, and I don't know, probably got like 100 something drawings of them. So yeah.
So if I call upon you to get some smaller manhole covers, and you can only do it in 2D, isn't a manhole cover pretty much a two-dimensional item? There's not much thickness to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, that's really what I need is the top. But being in 2D, I have that top pattern, and so when I was doing the storm grates, I basically just imposed it into Fusion 360, and then sort of was able to pick out all the little parts and then raise it just to make the texture on top. And me personally, when I get some time, that's something I would like to get into is going through and making little 3D print files of castings like that. So, make them sort of authentic, but yeah,
Well,
you don't have to have much.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry you brought it up, because now when Mr. Richardson comes over to take a look at my layout for my scenery AP, he's going to be looking for things like that.
Oh yeah.
Like you wouldn't look for him anyway, but especially now. Cool.
Brooks,
Well,
can we
thanks.
also mention NMRAX for the weekend? 8
Yeah,
new
sure.
clinics, starting at 9 a.m. Texas time.
Cool.
On YouTube and Facebook. You go to youtube.com, type in nmra.org, and you will see a live, what they call it, a live show. And you can click on that, and you can also rewind if you show up a little late and you wanna see something that you missed.
Anything good presenting?
Well, there's a clinic that's a little new. It's called Wooden Track, W Track, how you can get your grandkids involved in this. There's something about car tipping, which I think was a coal kind of thing. And then there was a signal clinic in the NERX series 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this is part 2 of it. And then Michelle Kempema is going to show us the UP Heritage passenger car fleet, where she literally got permission to take photos and videos on the inside and outside of all of them. And she also has a little bit of the history of these cars. And then there's a guy in Australia going to tell us about, I think, Queensland Rail. Now, might not be of any interest to us, but it's always good to see something that's running on wide gauge, something that we're not always used to think about. So
Yeah. We know about narrow gauge a lot, but there's also broad gauge out there too. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Hey, Speed.
Anything over 3 is broad gauge.
Hey, Speed. Are
sir.
they going to have designing, cutting, and building laser cut models by Craig Biziger?
This guy.
Is he still going to be on?
If I get his video, then yes, he will be on. But I'm only getting the video on Wednesday, and Thursday morning I leave for Orlando. So, he's on the hook.
Okay, I was looking forward to that one.
And there's a schedule on the nmra.org calendar. If you click on the event, then you will see the whole lineup of who's up when. Of course, everything is in New York time, so 1 hour earlier for us.
Y'all are doing those once a month, right?
So we used to do once a month 4 clinics. Now we switched to once a quarter. So it will always be on the first month of the quarter, 4th Saturday of that month.
Cool.
And it's always going to be 8 clinics now with a 2 or 3 hour break in between, so we can cover a little bit more of the planet.
Cool.
But you can always rewind. So that's the cool thing is, if you don't make it on time, then just slide the scroll bar back.
Yep. And they're posted to YouTube later. Yes, when they get around to it.
So the 4 hours will always be there. And on my own TX Namup website, there's a whole lineup of all 370 clinics that we've given so far. And each of them has a link you can click on that will take you to the specific time slice. And once we upload the individual clinics again, then we replace those links with the real clinic. That's all 55 minutes by itself.
Cool.
Hey, Speed.
Yes, sir.
I have to commend you guys on your rollout of the new digital NMRA magazine. The app in Apple works a whole lot better than the going to the web through my computer. It's really nice. I have to tell you that looks really good.
Thank you. We're still taking a bit of a beating because nobody listened. So they don't have an email address at the office. They log into the website and they change their email address and they think that's magically going to get to the office. And some people they click on a link and they get no magazines. And they're like, what is this? Well, watch the video carefully. Now, unfortunately, the app has also changed on us, where I tell people now that when you log into the app, at the bottom row, there's something, I forgot what the first two was, but the middle icon says library. And if you click on library, it will pop up the screen to log in or to sign up. All the others will do some stuff and show you some icons, but when you go to read the magazine, it's not there. But when you click on library, it's going to tell you, hey, you're not connected to the system. So either log in or create a login. So
I found that anomaly, but got past that real quick. And I like the fact that when I turn my iPad on its side, I get 2 pages at once. So the pages of the photos that span over 2 pages, you can see the whole thing. So the layout that was in there that spanned over 2 pages, I could now look at, which in contrast to some other magazines that you get on the web, they don't do that. So that was really pretty good. I like that.
Cool. I'm glad there's some that gets the benefit out of it. What most people forget is that there was, I think, maybe 2/3 of us got the printed magazine, or maybe just half of us, and the others got nothing. They never saw anything. They didn't even read the turntable or dispatch that gets emailed to us, so you could see who got an MMR and who got the certificates. Now people all across the globe, except Australia, is seeing this. And watch carefully. The Australian members are are yelling at their leadership because it's only going to cost them something like $24 more, Australian dollars, for them to get the magazine. So there might be a change there, and then everybody could see the magazine. Now, the big call is, if you want your different scale or your different gauge to be represented in the magazine, then just write the article and put the photos in and submit it, because upper management is done with this thing that there's no S scale, there's no O scale, there's no G whatever. I'm afraid to call that scale. I got beaten up once. So it's up to us to submit the content for the magazine. There's no more. We only do American HO scale. Sorry, that's not going to happen any longer. And when you do see a Lego article and you do see a wooden track article, please don't explode. Okay, it's just an attempt to get other people to enjoy the hobby as well. So I know some of us only do the narrow one and the tight curve one and the smaller car one, but give other people also some fun in the hobby.
So this means the end skill's no longer lost in the hobby then.
Yeah, but it's already dead.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks for all that, Speed, and I think we'll move on to Duane with the clinic now. So I want to welcome everybody to Duane Richardson as our clinician tonight. He's going to be talking about craftsman structures, designing, laser cutting them, I think. And he, like I mentioned earlier, he is the LSR AP chairman. So if you are working on your AP certificates, he's the guy to send all your paperwork into, and that's something that I want to. I'm starting on that, working on dispatcher, and of course association or official, or think while I'm doing this. So I want to encourage everybody out there to go down that. You're not competing against other people, just only yourself. And it's there to better you as a modeler as you go. So without anything further to do, I'm going to turn it over to Duane, and then we'll have. And Duane, do you want to do Q&A as you go along, or do it at the end? Do you have preference?
Yeah, as I go. If you got a question, hit me up, because I don't want anybody to forget it by the time we get down to the end. Okay. And we're going to cover quite a bit of stuff here tonight. So. I drive right in. I kind of goofed up and closed CorelDRAW, so I've got it opening back up again, and it's taken a bit of its own sweet time to open itself back up again. Initially, and really what the clinic in Temple is going to cover is going to be more on the design of a laser kit, but I can cover some of that tonight. I know John mentioned he was interested in this other clinic that's coming up. I can cover a little bit of that. I've been doing it now for about 13 years, I think, was when we bought our laser. So we've been at it for a while now, and learned quite a bit over the course of time doing all this. So it's there's some real ins and outs to it. It all runs off of CorelDRAW, or at least mine does, and it's real easy to use. If you can get around in PowerPoint to make a slide deck, you can do a clinic, and you can do a structure out of this. And from what I understand, I don't have one, but from what I understand, you can actually even take these drawings and out of Corel and load them out for a Cricut if you have one of those type of cutters. So, so let me see if I can manage to share my screen real quick. And have we got screen sharing turned on, Brooks? Yeah.
Let me double check. Oh, hang on. I think, yeah, here you go. Real quick, though, I see you got the Ultimation chopper there. How do you like it?
Yes, I do, and love it. Yeah.
I'm going to order one soon. I got the money.
Yeah, I would highly recommend. In fact, I've got their sander sitting right here, too. That's another nice little piece of kit. So,
yeah.
We're going to talk through some tools when I get ready to start, because one of the things I'm going to talk about a lot, besides how we design them and cut them out, I'm actually going to build one while we're sitting here talking. And cool. It should be basically done by the time we're done. Fingers crossed. All right, so let's see if I can share my screen here. And let's just share the whole screen. And come back down here, share. And let's bounce over here. So does everybody see my CorelDRAW now?
Not yet.
Let's see, where did my...
I started screen sharing.
Okay.
It says double click to enter full screen mode. I don't know if that's on your end or my end.
Might be on your end. I don't have anything over here that says that.
I just do that at
maybe my end though, because it's so slow. All right, we may skip the design portion of it, and I'll do that at Temple. Give you guys something to look forward to, right? Let me set this aside here, and I will jump back over. Well, as soon as I said that, I need my mouse back. Okay, so let's get back over here. Stop sharing.
Oh wait. Okay, hang on. Let me. Here we go. All right, I clicked the wrong thing. Probably that might. All right.
Duane, you might just want to restart sharing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Try it again now.
Okay.
There might have been. I think there was another setting.
And now I'm getting an error. Hopefully it doesn't bounce me out of here. It's telling me I gotta.
Yeah, try it now.
My Windows is throwing a fit now. It's saying an application's not responding and wants to close it. Oh. Hopefully it's not Zoom.
I stopped that screen share. Hopefully it didn't cause issues on your end.
So what are we getting off of my screen right now? Anything?
I just see you.
Okay.
See you.
Well, hopefully I can get back to that so I can flip the camera around here. I've got a second camera I'm going to turn on as soon as it gives me control back, and or if it gives me control back. It looks like the application's not responding as Zoom, so this will get interesting. Okay, well, I'll hold up a few things while we're waiting on this to come back. A few things I'm going to use tonight. We'll start off with talking about glues. I like Aleene's Tacky Glue. It's one of my favorites for building structures. You can also use regular old yellow wood glue. Yellow wood glue is going to give you a very stiff joint, and it won't have any flex to it. You try to flex it, and it's going to die. It's going to break on you. Oh, goody, it's back. Okay, so let me switch cameras here, and let's look at the desktop. Another thing I'll be using is a small container for water for cleaning out my paintbrushes. I've got this little guy here. My wife likes to
Well, he froze altogether. We need to insert Jeopardy elevator music here. He mentioned
difficulty.
He mentioned the Alliance Tacky Glue while we're waiting on him. I found these bottles the other day. Let me turn my background off just because. So there we go. I found these bottles the other day. They have a lid, so they sit like this on the desk. And so you don't have to, when you pick it up, it's always ready to go. And you don't have to shake the glue down to it. So found those on Amazon if anybody needs those. But I kind of wished all glue bottles were done that way. So, yeah.
Hey, Brooks.
Yeah.
I'll be quiet as soon as we get Duane back. But
no problem.
Yeah, I had a troop of Boy Scouts come through the studio last week, and they were asking all about merit badges for model railroading. And I told them, hey, I just work here, guys. I don't know anything. So what's the status of that? You guys know anything about that?
I'll have to look into that. I know about the model railroad merit badge, and Charles Anderson that's been on here. I don't think he was able to join tonight. He was instrumental in bringing it to the 2001 Jamboree, for that. So, but I don't think he's really involved with Scouts anymore. He's joined, I think his grandson's at a different trail life now, but let me look into that and see. I know that the BSA had that. I just don't know if anybody's like doing it. I think Brooks, go ahead. Yeah.
I believe both me and Don are merit badge counselors for what they now call the railroading merit badge, because it contains some safety, more safety and Operation Lifesaver things in it, and they got to plan a trip and go on a railroad, and then they have the option of doing a model railroading part as well.
Cool.
So still live and well, and you can get volunteer points for helping the Scouts. So it's encouragement to us to do it as well. I don't know if Don is still involved in it, but he was the big cheese on the Fort Worth side.
Yeah, I've done a lot of that in the past. I haven't done much of it lately, especially since I moved. But it's still alive and strong. I probably worked with, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 boys on it, and it's not a hard merit badge. It's one of the easier ones, I think, if it's presented right. But it covers really 3 different topics, and there were just a little history of it. There were talks of having a model railroading merit badge and then a railroading merit badge, and somebody said no, that's too much. So it covers 3 things. Speed kind of touched on it. It covers prototype railroading, and it covers model railroading, and it covers basically Operation Lifesaver safety things, which after I taught it for a while, I decided that's the most important part. And I tell the kids that, I said, if you learn nothing else from this merit badge, I want you to learn to not drive across railroad tracks when a train is coming.
Yeah, it's always the biggie.
Yeah. So Bob, maybe if he got back in touch with them, maybe we can, with people that we know, like I'd certainly be willing to drive up there, maybe teach that or something if we need to, maybe we could set up a Zoom thing or something, that'd be cool to do, with them.
So before you get involved in that, you got to make sure that your YPT training is up to date.
Right.
Yeah. I've got I used to do that, and I've still got an outline for how we taught it up here in Amarillo.
Hey, Brooks, let me add that reminded me. You don't have to be a route leader to be a merit badge counselor. You don't have to pay a fee. You don't have to fill out an application. None of that. You can be a merit badge counselor, but like the comment was made, I believe you do need to have youth protection training, which you do online.
Yeah. I was shooting a video on a Boy Scout camp, I don't know, many years ago. I had to go through all that again, to get on camp to shoot that video. So, yeah. But,
wow.
Cool. Well, I see.
I'm back.
Yeah, I think Duane's come back, and while you were gone, I was showing them you mentioned the Allen's tacky glue. I found these that have the cap on the, where you can set it down on that.
Aren't those great?
Yeah. I wish saw glues was like this, and painting
you got that right. I've got an old antique salt cellar, and I keep mine setting
there you go.
upside down so that the glue's always down at the bottom, because otherwise you spend all night shaking the glue bottle. So picking back up where we left off, I keep these little custard glasses around. They're great for doing decals because they're only about an inch deep. They're really wide, so you've got enough room to get your decal in it and get it good and wet. I've got one over here with a little bit of water in it for paintbrushes we're going to use here after a while. Use a lot of just plain old craft paints. Ceramic coat from Deca or Delta. Buy these over at Hobby Lobby and Michael's and Walmart and all of that. Another good item to have is a various selection of nail files, nail emery boards. You can buy these if you're around here. I get them locally over at Sally Beauty Supply. But if you've got a beauty supply store in your area, you can buy these things in various grits, just like you can sandpaper. So this one here in particular is 100 grit. This one here I grabbed as an example is 220 on one side and 320 on the other. Very, very handy. You can cut them like I'd use most of either end of this one. So I cut them in half and started getting the goodie out of the middle there. But there's a lot of different things you can do with those. You want things you can use when you're building structures that will keep it square, okay? And there's different engineering squares you can get. Here's two different sizes. I've got the big ones down on the floor, but these are really handy to have, but they are a little on the expensive side, and there are cheaper options. For example, Kaufman Graphics makes what they call their corner clamp. This is my favorite one. And we're going to demo its use here in a little bit, but it's a 90-degree piece of aluminum and a couple of screw down brass tubes here that we'll use to hold the pieces in place. Plain old quick grip clamps. Clothespins are also very handy. One of the best and cheapest ones are Legos and Duplos. These are perfectly square. And I had a rule with my kids. If I step on one of these barefoot, that dude's mine now. And you're not getting it back. And I've got a piece clamped up here. As you can see, I've got two walls clamped up, and I did this one actually incorrectly. And we're going to use this as a demo here coming up in a minute. Negative tweezers are really, really handy. Instead of being open and then you pinch them to close them, they're the exact opposite. So they're closed until you pinch them. I buy these at the train show from Jane's Tools. And I've been collecting, as you can see here, I've got a pretty good bit of them right here, and that's about half of them. I've got about that same number in my traveling clinic toolbox. They come in various points. Some are straight, some have hooks. The quality control they're made in Pakistan, and the quality control there is not exactly what you call real tight. So some of these things are real springy. Some of them takes a little bit of force to open them up. Some of them are really dangerously sharp, which are actually kind of handy. You can actually use that for distressing wood, for example, and those work out really well. Various knives and files I've taken to using scalpels. I like those real well. great big X-Acto knives, triangle squares, all that kind of good stuff. But all of these things you need to have in some semblance when you start working on a craftsman kit. And the biggest thing is you need to be able to cut your stuff out, and you need to be able to keep everything nice and square. Now, once you get it cut out, it's always good to take it and run it around with a little bit of sandpaper, or like say one of these emery boards. Sandpaper can be anything from regular old piece of 220 grit to these sanding sponges that you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's or your local home center. All of them work out really well. One thing that we will want to note, if you're ever got working with your strip wood, and we're going to cut a couple of pieces for some reinforcement here after a while, they're always a little fuzzy. And the biggest mistake I see a lot of modelers make is they'll fold the paper over it and they'll push it, or they'll pull it through, and then they'll try to turn around and push it back. That is always going to bind, and it's going to bend, and it's going to cause your piece to break. Always pull it, let it out, pull it, let it out, turn it, pull it, let it out. And it doesn't take a whole lot if you're buying good strip wood to get it, pretty much fuzz free.
Hey, Duane,
Yes,
on that topic, I got some Scotch-Brite pads. I was trying to do the same thing, and they work pretty well as I just cut a little piece off.
Yep.
And I was thinking that way I could get all those burrs off and not round the corners over too bad, like you can with sandpaper.
You bet. Yeah, it works like a champ. But that pretty much covers a lot of the basic tools. The biggest one I will tell you, and the most handiest thing that I've ever run across is that guy right there, your basic shot glass. And where this gets really important is most shot glasses have a little dimple in the bottom of it, make a little well. You stand that up on your desk and you put your glue up here. This keeps you from getting your elbow, your forearm, and your hand or whatever. A lot of people will put them on like a sticky note, and then once you get the glue piled up, you just peel it off, throw it away, and you've got another one, right? The only problem is that's sitting right here on your desktop, and inevitably you'll be doing something, watching TV, and you're going to lean up and do one of these, holding your parts together while they dry, and when you sit back, your glue pad comes with you. With it up here on the glass, it doesn't do that. With the flare of the shot glass, it is exceedingly difficult to knock it over, and it works out really well. Once the glue dries, you can come in here with, like I'm using a pen as a glue applicator. This one hasn't quite set up yet. It was a piece I was doing earlier, but you can come in here with a screwdriver or the tips of one of these negative tweezers and just pry the old dried glue up, and you're ready to go again. So that one was one of the best tricks I've ever learned. Now, we were talking a minute ago about this example that I made, and all I did was I took the two corners, glued them together, and clothespinned them to this old Duplo block. Now, like I say, those are really, really handy. I keep a couple of them on hand for demo purposes. The little clothespins, you'll note I turned them around. It gives me a little more clamping surface. It makes them a little stiffer as well, which I find real handy. But one of the most common mistakes I see modelers make, including a couple of very well-known YouTube guys, and it makes me cringe every time I see it, is that when you have a wall with a peak on it and you're gluing a wall to the side of it, the peaked wall always goes on the outside of the joint, okay? And by that, I mean, if you're looking at this layout right here of parts, this is how it was drawn and how it came off my laser, just like that. That was a solid piece of wood, and it is now all the individual pieces. So we take our peaked wall and we have our regular wall. And when you glue it together correctly, this wall is going to glue to the inside edge of the peaked wall, okay? What that's going to allow to happen is you now have a nice 90-degree corner, and you have no obstruction for your roof. So your roof's going to come straight down that angle, and it's going to lay nice and flat. What I end up seeing a lot of, and I don't know how well you can see this on the camera, is if the wall is glued to the outside of the peaked wall, your roof now lays on here like this, and you end up with a great big gap in it. And I see a lot of people build them like this. And again, one really well-known YouTuber, and every time I see him do that on a video, I want to throw something at my computer because it's such a simple mistake. And what you end up having to do then is you have to put a piece of trim up here along this edge to hide the joint. And typically you don't see a piece of trim up there. So that's really problematic, and it's one of the number one problems I see guys make when they're putting together any type of craftsman kit, from Campbell kits on up. Most of your injected molding type buildings like a Walther's Cornerstone building or something like that, those are built with the corners that are already mitered. They're designed to go together for you already, and they're really hard to mess them up. Some laser kits are very hard to build them incorrectly as well. Jeff Palmer and I actually did a clinic on this here a while back, and we decided we would actually, both of us bought a laser kit. We both build the same one. So I built this little grocery store here, and you can't build this one wrong. The way they've got it engineered and the way they've got it slot and tabbed into this floor, you have to build it correctly. So it was a little difficult. So I ended up cutting and designing this particular building for us to use instead. And we're going to work with that this evening. So with a basic laser kit, like I say, this is going to be a little false front type store. Even though these were something you'd see out, in an old Western setting back in the steam era, these buildings, a lot of them are still around today. It's not uncommon to see one still in use in different places. So it's something that can kind of fit in just about any railroad. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a quick prep on the wood and start getting some painting done. And one of the things that I found in working with the laser and working with the plywood material that I put in my kits is it doesn't need a lot of surface sanding. These are all nice and smooth as it is. The one thing that I will come back and sand on as soon as I figure out what I've done with my sanding sticks, not my emery boards, but the other ones, is I'll sand the openings a little bit just to make sure. The way a laser works is there's 3 power settings that denote the cut. There's the speed, the power, and the pulses per inch, or PPI. And depending on how they do their PPI as to how clean a cut you'll get. The higher the PPI, it means the holes that the laser punches are closer together, and it means the more burning, but it does mean you'll get a bit of a smoother cut. Now, what I have found in cutting ours is that I can take this, and I've got a PPI setting that will punch it out close enough that the parts will come out easily, usually with just a little bit of thumb pressure. But what you end up getting then is you end up having an edge that looks a bit like a postage stamp. So it's a little irregular. So I will come in with basically this little sanding belt on a stick here. And I'm going to come back in and I'm going to touch up the edges a little bit and make sure everything's all nice and smooth. This is something that, depending on the manufacturer of the kit, you may or may not have to do. A lot of the guys that are out there now produce their kits in such a way with a lot of slot and tab. I don't like doing that, mainly because I very seldomly build anything like it looks on the box. So what I'm looking for is the ability to kit bash. And a lot of manufacturers take that away from you, and you end up almost having to build it like they want you to. If you've got slot and tab, you can kit bash, but inevitably you're going to end up with a slot somewhere where you don't need it and you need to cover it. And the biggest problem is that all the kit manufacturers have bought their materials and they have custom cutters made. So if you buy, say, a Bar Mills kit, Art has his own 3D cutter at, I think they probably get all their stuff at Mount Albert. He's got his own custom cutter there. So he calls them up and orders his clapboard siding, and they run a bunch of it and send it to him. The problem is if you have a hole now in the middle of your wall or you want to add on to a building, you can't just go down to your hobby shop and buy clapboard siding that's going to match. Now, you can call Art at Bar Mills, and Art is more than happy to sell it to you. He's a great guy, great to work with, and he will sell you more material. I know I've done it. But finding matches is a bit of a pain. And if you got to call up the, I guess he's in Maine, isn't he? You have to call Maine to get him to send you some parts, then it's going to delay your work. So the first thing I'm going to do is, now that I've got everything a little edge sanded here, is I'm going to come in and start painting my walls. Now, I will use a fairly wide brush for this. I work out of the paint in the lid. I work with just enough paint on the top on the edge of the bristles, and I effectively dry brush this. I mean, I literally had a guy in a make and take clinic that we did here at the division, dropped his paintbrush until it hit the bottom of the paint can, lift it back up, and just shook it until it quit dripping, and then start putting paint on. It looked like Tammy Faye Baker putting on makeup. It was awful. And what he ended up putting on there was so much paint that it covered up a lot of the details. And he put so much paint on one wall, he could have painted his building and his buddies next to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming in and I'm really getting into the top of it. I want a good even coverage, but as the building works toward the bottom, I want to leave a little bit of bare wood showing. I do narrow gauge stuff. It's up in Colorado, and the mines went out of business and stuff, so money started getting hard to come by. Maintenance got deferred on a lot of things. So backs and sides of storefronts really got their paint deferred as long as they could. So if they got painted at all. So what I'm working on now is as the lower I go, the less I'm worried about it being even coverage. I want some streaking in here. I want to have a lack of paint almost. And this is going to help set up your weathering that we're going to do here in a little bit.
Hey, Duane, I've seen some people do like an India ink alcohol wash on the wood before they paint.
Yep.
Have you done that, or do you?
I have not done that yet, and I usually do it after I paint.
Okay.
And I do that because it helps tone down the brightness of the color, especially if you're dealing with a lot of white. You just want to make sure you let it get good and dry and that you're not scrubbing it around, because it will reactivate these acrylic paints and then turns it into a mess. So there's a bit of a trick to it, and I will show you how I make that happen.
Cool.
So we're going to make speedy work of this here as much as we can. And let's give that side just a little more. Now I'll set that aside. The thing to remember in weathering is the bottom of the wall stays wetter longer, and therefore it will rot faster. The ends of the woods are open. Wood is porous, it's fibrous, and it will suck up water and moisture, and then it will start to rot out. The bottom of the wall, obviously, because of gravity, with rain, it will stay wetter longer. With snow, it's piled up against it for the more northern climates, and it does tend to be a little more darker than the rest of it. The other big common mistake that a lot of guys will make in building any type of kit is they'll start weathering it, and they'll weather it all the way to the top up underneath the eaves. And up underneath the eaves is protected. It's out from underneath the rain. It's out from underneath the snow. The sun's not beating down on it a lot of times. So I've seen buildings, and I've got some in my weathering deck, where it's a barn sitting out in the middle of nowhere, and that particular barn hasn't seen a coat of paint since Moses was a pup. But yet the up underneath the eave, about the top 12 to 18 inches, looks like it's painted yesterday. It's all brand new. Yet there's not a drop of paint on anywhere the rest of the building. When you're working on a wooden kit, a lot of times when I'm laying these things out, and I didn't do it on this one because I was in a hurry, I got to upgrade to Windows 11, and then I had to reload my drivers, so I didn't get this off the laser as early as I wanted to. I will typically lay out the structure so that the direction of the way the wood is supposed to be. So like this is vertical scribe. I would turn that wall this way on the cutter so that it's actually running with the grain. And right now I've got a little cross grain going on here, which is a little discouraging, but we're going to make it work. Fronts of stores were always well taken care of. So if you ever needed a coat of paint on something and you want something to look a little bit nicer, this is the edge you want to make that happen on. Anything public facing, basically. If even the railroads were real good about this. Passenger cars, they ran those through the wash. Reefers actually got washed because they were food service. But boxcars, cabooses, things like that, nah. Yeah, who cares about it? It's just the employees crawling around there, and who cares if they get dirty, right? So on the front of this, I'm going to go ahead and actually get a more even coat of yellow with a little less of the weathering, but we're going to put just a little bit on there and see how well this one goes. You can see I'm working pretty quick here. I'm not putting just a whole lot of paint on. This is actually 1/16 inch plywood. If this was basswood, then we'd be looking at trying to make sure we painted both sides. If you're working with solid materials, clapboard siding, board and batten tends to be made out of one piece of basswood. When you're working with that, whatever you do to one side to get wet, do it to all sides. Wood's a funny thing, and like I say, it's porous and fibrous. You get one side wet while the other side's dry. One side can now expand while the other side contracts, and you'll end up cupping it and warping it. So we're going to go for a light yellow building with white trim. So that gets us three of the pieces down, and I'm going to shake my paint up again, get a little more paint in the top of the bottle, shake it once or twice, and we're going to come right back to it. All right, now I've got, the way this one came out height-wise, I've got even boards except for this little narrow one up here at the top, and I'm going to hide that up at the top. A lot of times I'll turn them around and put it down at the bottom, and then I'll hide it with weeds and things like that, but for this particular instance, I'm going to go ahead because the boards line up with the back of the wall this way. So the top of the wall gets a pretty even coat of paint down about a board's width or so, and then we're going to start dry brushing the rest of it down. And you can see I'm working really quick here, and this isn't me just trying to get into a rush because we're on a clinic and I'm trying to save y'all's time. And this is how I work. I'll have this building together, in pretty short order. If I'm working on it as a contest model, yeah, I might take a little more time with it. If I'm going to put an interior in it, then yeah, I might take a little more time on it. But something like this, where it's a quick and dirty, and we're trying to maybe make a background building or something that sets about halfway back on the layout, this will go together pretty quick. And this, when you dry brush it, dries exceedingly quickly. Acrylics are good about that to begin with, but as long as it's not real thick, you can get a good dry job on your paint pretty quickly. In fact, first pieces we painted are now already dry enough to continue on to our next step. When you're painting this on, I don't know if you can tell on the camera if I'm holding it up enough where you can see it, or if the lights are too bright or not bright enough. I'm working in the direction that the wood would be on the actual building. So in this case, this is left to right. So I'm scrubbing this now the way I'm holding it up and down. So I'm going with the grain of the wood. And that way, and I'm trying to somewhat paint a board at a time when possible. So I've got the paintbrush turned on this way and not this way. I'm not covering as much ground that way. But when I get down to this point where I'm kind of down to a dry brush, I am trying to paint it one board at a time, mainly because that's how you paint a house, one board at a time. So if you have brush streaks and things to that effect, you can work them out across one board as opposed to 4 or 5 boards. Then it just doesn't look natural. And that's a common mistake we see in the contest room, is guys will come in here with a big old wide brush and they'll paint the whole side, and they'll just, 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch brush, and they'll really be going wild on it. And you'll end up getting streaks across 4 and 5 boards. And it's like, was your paintbrush about 3 feet wide? No. Well, that's kind of what it scales out to be. So, all right. Now, there's our general coat of paint. From here, there is something that a lot of modelers will skip, and we're going to cover it some here in a bit. But you'll notice I didn't do any of the edges inside the door jambs or inside the windows. I've left those alone because I'm going to paint those the trim color. And what we find a lot of times in the contest room is that gets missed altogether. And then another common one I'm about to show you. So I'm going to run this in a little bit of water. If this were a darker color, I'd whip out the brush soap and all of that. But it's a light yellow. It cleans out fairly quickly. And I'm going to go to this antique white, and we're going to paint all the trim pieces here real quick. Ugh. Well, that's gruesome looking. Big old blob in the lid there. Shake this up a little more. If you have your layouts out in the garage, I don't know how many of you are in that particular scenario, but if you do not keep your paint out in the garage. If you do not keep your paint in and this goes for your house paint and everything else, if you do not keep that in a climate controlled environment, your paint's going to freeze when it gets below freezing in your garage, and then your paint's ruined. So what I've got here is the trim sheet. This will have our windows and our doors on it, and along with a little piece of trim. So I'm going to come in here and we're going to work through this one pretty quick. This one I'm going to go ahead and paint it with the wide side just to cover some real estate a little quickly. And then I am going to follow along, like these are the door trims. So I'm going to follow those around, kind of chase those a bit. I do recommend painting these while they're on the sheet, but it does, and a lot of modelers do it this way, but it does, however, lead to a common mistake. When they pop these parts out and go to put them on the model, they never go back and paint the edges that aren't getting touched right now. And that comes up a lot in the contest room or in AP judging for that matter. When working with white and yellows especially, you'll pick up some ash that's from the cut itself, and you'll need to go back in and hit them with a little more paint to get a good color on them. So you can see this is kind of graying out a bit. I did go in and already relieve all the holes and pieces out of this that were cut to be open, so all the windows are open. The pieces that were left in there that where the glass is going to show through have already been removed. A lot of your kit builders will go in and put little gates on those, so you've got to go back and cut them out. And I find that to be really problematic because these are very, very fragile when you start getting into parts this small, and you tend to break a lot of things. Now, when I cut a kit out, I do make them very small, but I try to get these parts where they'll cut all the way out. And then I will also give you a few extras in the kit too, just in case something breaks. And if they don't break, then you throw them in your box and you've got them to use on another project. So while I'm in here, I am painting the edges of the windows and of this door, and get those nice and white. And I'm not going to worry about the second one. I design my stuff. I like to do a lot of interior work in mine. So when I do this, I usually will give you 2 sets of window trim, the back side of the door as well. So if you want to have the door partially open or something, you can see door detail. But in this particular case, we're going to have the doors closed and not worry about that piece for right now. Get the back door backer painted here. Reach in there and grab a few of the edges while I'm here. Okay. I've got some window work here. Get that done up, and then we'll go move on to weathering. Kind of like watching paint dry, isn't it? Quite literally.
Are you thinning the paint at all, or just using it straight?
I am using it straight. The pigments on this stuff are really big, and I've found that thinning it just doesn't give you very good coverage at all, especially in the lighter colors, white and yellow. And yellow is always problematic to brush anyway. No matter what you're painting, whether it's enamels or acrylics or whatever. I don't know if it's the science behind the way those pigments are or how it all works. I'm sure that there's probably somebody that paid more attention in chemistry than I did that could explain it all. But yeah, I use these straight. I've never tried airbrushing the craft paint. I know some people that have, and I've heard mixed results. But it can be done. I
was doing that not on a wood structure, but a plastic structure, and but I was thinning it down quite a bit, and using like a 0.5 needle.
Yeah, if you're going to airbrush it, yeah, if you're going to airbrush,
0.05.
definitely going to have to thin it out. And any acrylic, when you're airbrushing it, you need a bigger needle. We've all been used to, putting the smallest needle we can find in our Badgers and Pachets and things like that over the years for shooting flocal. But you can't use that needle on acrylics. The pigments are so much bigger. The paint's thicker as a general rule, and just doesn't carry well out of the brush like that.
I've seen some people do use like a sea sponge and like dab the paint on.
Yep.
Have you done that?
Yep.
Or
that works out real well. In fact, you don't even have to have a sea sponge. You can use sea sponge. You can use packing sponges. Anything that's just got a really big open cell to it. And the best thing you can do is reach in and just rip chunks out of it. And then you do it like you do dry brushing. So you're going to put a little bit of paint out. You'll dip the sponge in it, dry brush most of that off on a paper towel, and then come back in and sponge in. That works really well on putting in brick, for example. Really gives you some really nice variation for doing brickwork. All right, we'll set that aside and let that dry a little bit. Now, for weathering, I tend to use a lot of stains and a lot of powders, colored pencils, watercolored pencils. There's just, whatever you like to use, whatever works for you, give it a rip and let it work. I do like a lot of stains for basic weathering, and we're going to use one here. You can make them up yourself. Brooks mentioned the alcohol and India ink. Be very careful. A lot of guys will use shoe dye in India ink, or shoe dye and alcohol. Shoe dye for browns and things will work. However, blacks are problematic. Most of your shoe dye in black isn't black, but actually a very, very, very dark blue. And if you have fluorescent lights in your train room, your pretty dark stains in your modeling bench, when you take them out to the train room, are now kind of a bluish purple color. And it looks really bad. The only leather dye that I know of that is actually black is USMC black. It has nothing to do with the Marine Corps, but it's a great way to remember it. That is actually black, and you can mix it down with alcohol. Now, the one thing I will recommend when you go to buy your alcohol, buy the 91% isopropyl alcohol. Spend the extra 50 cents or whatever and get the 91%. Most of the people will go down to Walmart or CVS or Walgreens or whatever, and they'll buy the 70%. The more alcohol means less water. Less water means it dries faster and there's less warping. So when you're making up your stains, definitely pop for the more expensive alcohol.
Hey, Duane.
Yes, sir.
I got a picture to share. I think I showed you this one. That sign I was looking at the other day. I was showing you. It turned out kind of purple. Yeah. So that's the back of it right there. Sort of is not black. So and that's one of those Viterbo stains there. So I just wanted to show people that to reinforce what he was saying.
Yeah, one of the things too that if at all possible, wherever you're modeling, put the same lights over your workbench that you have over your layout, when at all possible. For example, what I have up here are Philips Hue lights, and so I can turn those down a bit because you get an awful lot of glare. Okay, did I just drop again?
I gotta unmute myself. No, I still see you.
Okay. Yeah. All of a sudden, my window flipped over to something else. So
it's because I was screen sharing that picture.
Gotcha.
So
I do like to use alcohol and India ink quite a bit. I've got several different jars of it mixed up. I also use a lot of commercial stains out here. We're going to use one of those tonight. Now, one of the things, and I'm going to turn it this way because I think it might be able to read it this way. Is that upside down to everybody, or is that right side up?
It's upside down,
okay.
But we see the colors. Yeah, there you go.
So what I've got here is storyboards, what we call it for woodworking. And this is all the various hunter line stains that I've got. And what I do is I'll take a piece of it here. I measured out, I don't even know what it is. I think I just set the stop and just started cutting boards. And So this one's barn red, this one's western redwood, and I dunk it in, pull it out, wipe it off, and then I let that dry. I come back in, I glue it down to the board, and then I write down what it is. If I start mixing these, then I'll glue it down to the board and I'll write down this is, half rust, half sandstone, or it's, whatever the ratio might be. And some of them are really involved. I mean, some of them might be, this is 2 drops of cement, 1 drop India ink, 1 drop cottage white, and 1 drop creosote black. And you work through it that way. But what this will give you is a good representation that you can look at and decide what colors am I looking for? What color do I want to try to weather this in with? And the color we're going to work with tonight is driftwood, mainly because I've got it handy. But Hunter line stains come in a little bottle like this. Rick and Eileen are great to work with. They've got about 4 dozen colors now, something like that you can use. And they grab a different brush here. Go with that one. Boy, that one can dry. I'll work out of the lid again. And again, I'm going to work. I'm not going to scrub it in. I'm going to give it some real light strokes because I don't want to reactivate that paint. And this time I'm going to work from the other direction. I'm going to work from the bottom up and then let it dry brush on the higher up I get. Because again, we want it to look as clean at the top as we can. So I'm going to come back in, and on this front, I'm really just going to dry brush this on here. And the whole idea of this is kind of several fold here. You want to give it some shadow. You want things to pop out and be seen, the scribe in the boards, some of the detail. If you went in and put nail holes in there, which I'll preach against here in a second, you want those to catch some of that stain so that it'll pop out and be visible. The other part of this is you want to tone down the colors some. And this yellow is pretty bright. Whites tend to be a little too white a lot of times. And this will help tone it down a bit. So that's probably a little darker than I really wanted, but we can live with it. You note I keep putting the lid back on and shaking it up. I don't like to dip my brush in the bottle if I don't have to. Yeah, it takes a little bit longer to do it this way, but I inevitably get too much on the brush if I go straight to the bottle. So, and again, I'm kind of working somewhat straight up and down, somewhat across the boards. So some of these things are going to streak side to side. Some of them are going to streak up and down. Up and down, obviously, because of the weather and the way things tend to flow downhill with gravity. Some of it is just going to be more from a individual board perspective. You can use different colors. So you can come in here with a lighter color and then come back over that with a darker one if you want to. Nothing wrong with that at all. Offers some variation. And so we're just going to do a few things here and we'll come back in. And if we've got a few sins, we can cover them up later. I'm going to go to a slightly darker color here, medium brown. Let's go with that one. That bottle there needs to be replaced. I'm getting down to the nitty gritty on it. Your thumb is a wonderful blending tool. That one up. Get a little more on that. And some of these, like I say, some of these are really too dark. I mean, some of this in here is just a mess. But signs and things like that will cover it up nicely and you won't have to worry about it. Okay. Now, here's where I go back with the color code again. Let's see here. Hang on just a second. My dog is about to go ape, and I need to get my kid in here to let him out. Okay. All right, so I'm going to come back over here and touch some of this stuff up because some of it's a little too dark, some of it's a little more streaky than I would like for it to be. So here we're going to come in, we're going to get a little bit on the brush. I'm going to do that a couple times on the paint, on a paper towel, and I'm going to come back over these and try to blend some of this back in. This one I am going to work more side to side than anything else. This is where a lot of your peeling paint effect is going to come from. There is a type of paint out there. It's an egg tempera paint. And this is really, really old stuff. I mean, like Da Vinci painted with stuff like this. It's a little on the pricey side, but it comes in a tube. You can buy it at art supply stores. And the neat thing about it is it doesn't stick very well. And it creates some really nice peel paint effect. It you can come back in and distress it a little bit, and it peels off of there and really gives you some nice effects. Okay. I don't know how well that's showing up on camera there, but that'll give you an idea. Okay. All I'm doing is come back in with a really dry brush and scrubbing this around a bit, one board at a time. I may get a little bit cleaner up here at the top. I got that one a little too dirty. All right. Now, even though, actually, let me touch up this front. Even though we were just working with this, it's still, we're still ready to actually take the next step with it and actually start gluing this building together. So we will be able to move fairly quickly here. See what I mean about putting something down on your workbench? You end up with your hand in it. All right, there we go. Now, you can take any two walls, and what we're going to do is what a friend of mine dubbed the L7 method. We're going to make an L, we're going to make a 7, and we're going to then put them together. So what we've got going on here is we're going to take these two walls, and I want to glue those two together. Now, if you're using an engineering square or a like the Duplo we were using earlier, you can use these pretty easily. And all you have to do is line the wall up here, line the wall up here, glue them together, lift it up, hold it in place, and then come in and clamp it. But I really do like these corner clamps a lot. These things are really, really nice. With these, you're going to come in here. We're going to put one in, and we're going to put it in too deep. And I'm going to thumb tighten that one down. Then we're going to come in. We're going to line this one up. And actually, I put this in upside down. You put it in with the bottom facing out. And then we're going to take this wall. I'm going to get it oriented in the right direction. I'm going to push it up against this one, which is why I put it in too deep. And then I'm going to come in here. I'm going to hold this down, and I'm going to slide it down to the bottom of my work mat here, and then I'm going to tighten this one up. I want to open this back up. I'm going to check my alignment, make sure it's all going to come in nice and square. And it looks like I got this one off just a little bit. So I'm going to loosen this one up. And make sure that we're setting flat on the work surface. And we're going to have a good, nice 90. Now I'm going to slide this piece back out. I'm going to put little A-leans on the edge of my shot glass here. I don't put just a whole lot out there because no matter how little you put out, you're going to end up with too much and you're going to end up having some waste out there anyway. And if you don't have enough, it's easier just to go back to the bottle. Now, as you can see, I'm working with a sewing pin here. I like working with these. They're nice and stiff and they're small. It keeps me from getting too much glue on the joint. Now, you can put not enough glue on there and they do what they call starving the glue joint. And that can be problematic, but you also don't want so much that you end up with a ton of squeeze out either when you start clamping these things together, because then you're going to have to go back in and clean it out, and it's going to make a shiny spot on your model. Easily corrected in some cases with a little dull coat, but if you don't find it till after you put your window glass in, now you're trying to put dull coat on something and not fog your windows over. So all I did is I just put just a little bit of glue on that. I'll come back over here. And I'm going to line this piece up. I'm going to make sure we're getting a good alignment, and I'm going to make sure that we're flat on the bottom again. I'm going to push these two together. I'm going to come up here and do a little visual inspection. Everything looks good. So I'm going to tighten this up. I'm going to double check it again because now I'm seeing some rock in this. Now we're good. It's just the top heaviness of the clamp. All right, I'll take this one and I'll set this aside. Doing this step can help you, well, actually, I'll lay it like this. Doing that will help you keep your models square. So now we've got that one. So we're going to have this one and this one. So I need to go this side to this side, and I need my other clamp. So we're going to repeat the process. I'm going to stand this one up. We're going to drive it in deep. We're going to clamp it down. Bring this one over, make sure I've got the top facing up. Back that screw off a little bit, get that in there where it's supposed to go, make sure we're flat on the ground. Tighten that one up, slide this back out. Now, one thing these clamps can do is they can slide to the side a little bit on you, and that's what happened on this one. So I'm going to loosen it up, and we're going to do this again, because unfortunately the foam in the bottom of this thing was over in where I was going to be putting glue, and I don't want to glue the thing to the clamp. So I'll make sure I'm a little more aligned this time. I'm flat. Double check it. We all look good. So let's get some glue on it. Anything that I do to wood that gets it wet, whether it's going to be stains, washes, the paint job, and all of that, I do while the building is still what I like to refer to as in the flat. I can lay everything flat. I can put weights on it and let it dry flat. If you're working with some of the older kits where the walls are not plywood, but they're solid basswood, when you're working with clapboard siding and things like that, you're going to have to let these walls dry first. I've got the advantage here that these are plywood, so I don't have to worry about the warping problem at all. And we can keep on working. So you can actually make pretty quick work of things. But again, if you're working with the basswood, what you do to one side, you do to both, and let it dry. Now we've got this little piece right here, and it's going to go on the back side of this, and it's going to give us a place to actually have a little decorative trim up there. But we're going to put that on once the roof's on it. So now, let's do a little quick cut out here. Even though these should pop out, a lot of times when you paint them, the little bit of paint will seep in. And so I come back in with my scalpel and just kind of help make a quick pass down through there. So if anything sealed itself back in because of the paint, I can get it to come out, hopefully without breaking anything. Don't have to put a lot of pressure on it. If you're having to put a lot of pressure on a knife, you're pushing and you're working it too hard. If you're cutting through wood, you should hear the fibers cutting if there's anything left to cut. You can actually hear this one's actually popping a little bit as I'm cutting, and that's that the rest of that char on there from that stamp edge I was telling you about earlier. And get our doors cut out here. I don't need this one, but we'll cut these two out. Usually when you're working with something on the laser, even though in this case it's plywood, it still has a grain edge, and cutting across the grain is always going to be a harder cut than with the grain. So I always recommend you make your cuts accordingly. Just be prepared for them to be a little stiffer. Now this particular kit has just about broke on me. And it did. So I'm going to be a little delicate with that window. I've designed this one where the windows and all of their trim nest together. So this one actually will go on as kind of one piece. Okay, so let me lift that one out of there, and let's get that center piece out, and then we're going to have to be real ginger when we put that one together. Another material that we're going to be using here shortly is the window glazing. A lot of kits will give you acetate. You'll hear a lot of modelers, contest modelers like myself or Gil Freitag and some of the folks will tell you they use microscope slipcover glass. That makes wonderful windows. However, it's real glass and it's hard to work with. You need to get you a diamond scribe from Micromark if you're going to do that. And when you go to cut that stuff, it doesn't work as much like cutting real glass as you would like to think it does. You have to start in the middle and work to the edge, flip it around, work to the edge, or you will break them. Lots of them. It was my go-to for contest models and foreground models for years and years. However, I was working on a model and needed a rather large set of windows for one on our club layout, and couldn't find any slip covers big enough to do that. They make them up to 3" by 3", but they're really pricey and they're hard to come by. You can't order them off Amazon, but wasn't on Prime back then. In fact, I don't even think they had Prime back then. So I decided, all right, fine, I'll go up to Hobby Lobby and I'll find me something clear up there I can use. So I got in there and started asking them about where I could find some acetate. And the guy thought about it for a minute. He says, well, what are you going to use it for? And I told him, he goes, oh, in that case, I know exactly what you need. If you go into Hobby Lobby, on the aisle where they have all the stuff for architects and drafting, all the angles and compasses and all that kind of stuff, if you go onto that aisle, there is some material in there called Duralar, Duralar. It is an acetate replacement. It is a Mylar type material. You can buy it by the roll, or you can buy it by 8.5 by 11 sheets. A roll is not overly expensive, but it will be more window glass than you will ever need. Go together with your buddies and buy a roll and split it, because it will do everything on your layout and several more. So while we're popping these parts out, the walls are over here drying. And by the time we get all this done, we can actually start marching on. We'll work around the clamps as long as we can, and then we'll make that next step. Give time to dry up in the clamps as much as we can. All right, that one's about ready to pop out. So we can lift him out of there. Now this is where, again, we start seeing some things get skipped. I mentioned before about painting the edges. I did that on the windows because I'd already popped the centers out, but things like doors and window frames, a lot of times these will get missed. So we've got all of our parts that we're going to use out. So let's come back in and touch up some edges. Clean that off. That will do. And then let's touch up the edges. Bigger brush than I normally use for this, but it will work. And all I'm doing is kind of bouncing the brush on those edges. I don't want to try to scrub them too much. These are really delicate and they can break easily. Also don't want to get too much paint on them. I think it's our door jambs. Get a window trim here real quick. Pop that piece out of there. There's going to be this guy here in the middle to touch up. Pop the windows out, so we need to get those edges. Okay. Now, one of the other things I like to do at a time like this is I'm going to come back in here and paint the inside of the openings for the windows. And I paint mine the same color that I paint the window trim. This is pretty typical in painting structures. And it will help everything kind of blend in a little bit. So I'm just giving these a quick coat of white. I'll get the door here in a minute. In fact, I'll get both doors here in a little bit. Okay. That one's ready to work with. Now that I've got that one out, let's go ahead and do the door on it. A little paint over. Thumb is a great eraser. All right. As you can see, they weren't in the clamps that long, and they're already set up enough that we can be working with them. Now, you don't want to go, putting a lot of pressure on them and things like that, but they will work together nicely. Now, we've got a couple of things we can do. We can either go ahead and glue them together and start tinkering on the roof, or we can put the windows in it either way. For sake of time, we're definitely not going to get this one done tonight, so I'm going to step forward a little bit here, and we'll work on a couple of other things. I know we're getting late. Another common problem when people start messing around with craftsman kits is the roof, okay? One of the things we'll see people do is they'll grab this guy here, they'll grab their roofing, and they'll just start laying it down. And the first thing I do in all my kits is I scribe some lines in here to help keep you oriented, because what's going to happen is over time, as you start laying these rows in here, you're going to find that you start to drift a little bit, and it's going to become more and more apparent. And all of a sudden you get to the top of the roof and your rows look like that. It's really easy to do. It's really common. Real roofers do it. That's why they've got little gauges and things. They pop on them to keep things straight. So I put some lines on here to help you with that. But what I'll see a lot of times when we're scoring a model for somebody, whether in the room or at their house or whatever, is I'll look through here and I'll see a gap in the shingles, and I'll see raw wood underneath it. When you have a real roof on a house or on a shed or a barn, the first thing you do is you put down tar paper. So the first thing I do with these is I take a black Sharpie, and I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to color this roof. Now, this is an old Sharpie, so it's not covering as well as I would like for it to. You don't have to be real perfect with it. You just want to try to get some black down on it as much as you can. And then the other thing I'll show you guys, it's a neat little trick that I picked up here recently, is instead of gluing these down, we're going to use a tape. 3M makes this stuff, and it's a transfer tape. You can find it on Amazon. But you have to buy it by the box. So I build a lot of stuff. I teach a lot of classes and things. So buying it by the box for me is not a problem. In fact, a lot of times when I'm doing my hands-on clinics, I'll bring a box with me and sell a few extra rolls if somebody would like some. It's 3M transfer tape is what it is. Comes in a white box. It's about $45 for a box of it, something like that. And you get like a dozen or more rolls of it. This is really, really sticky stuff, and it is really, really thin. So what you can do is, after you've colored this whole thing black, is you can come back in and roll a piece out, get it to where it's just a little bit longer than your roof, and get yourself a pair of scissors here. I tend to work on it off my finger, but you can do it however you want to. And we're going to gauge our length here, and we're going to give it a quick cut. Now, oops, that was the protective film. There we go. All right, now we're down to the sticky stuff. Didn't realize I had 2 layers of it. So one side of it, once you get down into the tape, is really, really sticky. The back side has a clear protective film on it. So what you want to do is come in here and line this up, and then we're going to cut it for length, and then we'll apply it. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to line it up on my bottom edge. I'm going to hold onto it with one finger. I'm going to pull it tight across the other side, and then I'll run a finger down to kind of help burnish that down a little bit. And then I'm going to come back in here and peel this edge back and peel that paper back off of there. And sometimes that can be a challenge in and of itself. So let's see what we can get going here. Find us an edge. This is the only disadvantage to this tape, is it's getting that backer off of there can be a little finicky. So what ends up happening right there is I just laid down a very fine bead of this tape, and it's 2 boards wide. And I'm going to pick this little piece of dust out of this so I don't end up with a lump in my roof. Then all you have to do is take your row of shingles. We're going to come up here and we'll start at the bottom. I'm going to let the longer ones dangle out over the edge just a little bit. And I'll make sure my short ones cover the roof deck, and I'm going to put a little pressure on it and tape them down. Now, when I cut these things, I cut them in great big sheets. So I've got a ton of them here. And when I draw these things out, there are about 10 or 12 different individual rows of these. So they're not all the same. These are supposed to be aged out wooden shakes. So they're all going to have some variation to them. So I'll start peeling a few rows out of here, and we'll apply a little bit of roofing. One of the other things you can do once your roof is ready to put on, now let's go back here first. So I've got a row here that I want to make sure I offset as much as I can, and the line that cuts the shingle itself doesn't go the full width of the row. So I'm overlaying them a little bit. I'm staggering them so I don't get any lines directly lining up if I can avoid it. And I press that one down. I'll grab the next one. Again, these are all somewhat random, so there are going to be occasions where you can't stagger them like you might want to, but they are going to give you a good shape feel when they're all said and done. This is cut out of an artist paper, and depending on how you want to do your roof, a lot of times I'll give the kits a kind of a neutral new look, and then that allows you to weather them out however you want to. But if I'm working with somebody on a custom one and they specifically want some weathered looking shingles, I will do this with the gray.
If you're doing that structure to get like have it merit, how what if you get a row that's like slightly off? Is it like noticeable or?
It depends on how noticeable it might be. I may come back in and peel it back up and relay that row. If it's not too bad, and with the randomness of shakes, a lot of times you can correct it and it won't be that big a deal. But there's a kind of where we've gotten started. I just laid in 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 rows there. No, 6 rows there, and you can do them. That's about a ½ an inch or so. You can do them that quick, and you're not waiting for glue to dry. I can flip this straight over here. I take a chisel blade on this. I'll line the flat part of it up against the edge of the roof, and I'll just kind of guillotine down a little bit. And that takes off all the extras and any extra tape that might be sticking over the edge. And you can wait to do that part until the whole roof's done if you want to. It's not that big a deal. But there's our start. And to give you an idea what a finished one looks like, by the time I hold it up, it turns it awful yellow. But there's one that's finished in a brown that I've gone back in with some chalks and some stains and weathered out a bit. And if I can get it in some better light there. That'll be end up what the roof will look like. Now, on a lot of kits, they may not give you anything to help support the roof. One of the things that I do on mine, and anytime I've got a Craftsman kit, is I keep a fairly healthy supply of strip wood available. I've got 3 boxes over here of nothing but strip wood. And then over here to my left are 2 of Mount Albert sells these, and I've got one behind me. I'll show you when I switch cameras here in a minute. They make what they call the lumber store, and it's a square block with a Lazy Susan and all these tubes in it, and you can sort out your strip wood in it. I bought one loaded with HO, one loaded with S, and then I bought one empty. And the other thing that I do too, for those of you who go to the narrow gauge convention, Mount Albert always has a booth in there, and when they go to do a run of strip wood, they don't just go in there and go, okay, I need to have 500 pieces cut so I can make X number of packages. They will go in and, all right, I need to make 500 of these things, and they'll just start batch cutting them. And when they get down to the end of them, they'll have extras. So as they're going through and they go, oh, no, that's got a knot in it, they'll throw it in a box. And then anything that's an overrun, they'll throw it in the box. And when they come to the narrow gauge convention, you can buy a bundle of them that's about that big around, that might be 1.5 feet long. It might be a little bit longer, and it's all sorts. It's just miscellaneous sizes. And you can buy that whole bundle for $10. I have bought bundles at every narrow gauge convention I've been to since they started doing that. And in fact, one show up in Minneapolis, I bought 4 or 5 bundles. So I've got 2 boxes sitting over here to my right, literally full of all sorts of strip wood. So as I'm working through looking for a piece like maybe this one to cut for reinforcement in the corners, I'll come back in now that I've got it all glued up. I'll cut a few pieces of this and I'll add it here to this corner as a reinforcing piece. And that Ultimation cutter comes in very handy when you start cutting stuff. I don't know the scales of everybody on here. Do we have any O scalers on the call tonight?
I know we've got HO and G.
Okay.
Of course, in speed down.
All right. Well, the G scale person.
So.
If you've ever paid much attention to what happens when you're working with your Northwest Shortline chopper, when you make a cut, as you get down toward the bottom of the edge, it does this. Because the blade deflects. Well, I have several different types of cutters. I've got your basic chopper. Charles Goodrich, the Division III director, actually has a little side company called Precision Measurements. Charles makes a cutter. He makes it out of acrylic. And where this one's kind of cool is it has this mechanism on it here. So instead of it being a straight guillotine, it slices down through the wood. I did some measurements. Jeff Palmer and I have been working on an article that Jeff's going to write up for the Model Railroad Hobbyist, talking about the differences between the three machines. And what we found was that the chopper had the absolute worst blade deflection. The guillotine style, still using the same kind of blade, but because it had this cutting motion to it, was infinitely more accurate. And then the Ultimation one here was even more accurate than that. Now, this guy's pricey. I will tell you up front. I think this one's street valued at almost $170. So it is not for the faint of heart. But I will tell you that in cutting materials, when we were doing the testing, I did a O scale 12 by 12, an S scale 12 by 12, and then an HO 12 by 12. And then we measured the deflections and went the whole scientific method route. But the sander here, the cutter is very nice. It actually uses a carpet blade with a chisel to it. So you end up working, getting a really nice straight edge out of it. You take a nice slow cut, and it will power through without any problem. I need to mount this on a board, but I just chewed through that thing, which is almost an O scale 12 by 12. And I don't know if the camera is going to show this, but there's next to no blade deflection there at all. So it's pretty impressive.
When you said it has a chisel blade, that means it's flat on one side and then the
correct. You've only got a bevel on one edge. Yep.
Cool.
And then I lay that on the sander over here. The same company makes this Ultimation sander. It's a hand crank disc sander. It has a rubber ring around the wheel, and you can just take it and get up here and rock it back and forth and help true up a board. And then I'm going to come back in. I'm going to cut a second one. And let's see here. I can put a block on that side. I can put a block on that side. The front ones are going to need the thinner one. So to keep the block from being seen in doorways and in windows, I'm going to make two different ones here.
On that Ultimation sander, do you have that repeater attachment they sell for it?
I do, and I really like that.
Yeah.
I haven't built a wooden trestle since I've got this, but when you start working on something like that, that repeater is going to be a godsend, because when you lay this thing up here and you want to make a cut and you need it to be, let's say, that angle. Don't know what that angle is, but let's just say you need that angle, and you need the piece to be, as soon as I did that, I backed it all the way off. You need it to be that long. You cut your strip wood in here, you slide this spring piece back. You load the piece of board in there, and then you start cranking the handle. And as the board sands down, the spring tension runs out. And when it runs out, now your board is at the exact length with the exact angle you need. It's pretty handy. I've done a couple of 3 things with it. Now, one thing I will say is if you don't have one of these, get you one. It's just a little X-Acto precision square. And I use it to come back in, because you can use the gauge over here that says it's at 90. But, you know, I'm one of these measure twice, cut once kind of people. Trust but verify. So I want to make sure that when I'm working with these things, that we can make sure we get good square cuts. But you're going to also want some sort of ridge pole across here to help hold your roof up. And basically, once I get this glued together, I'll come back in here and just hold it up here, make a mark with my pencil, cut it off, cut it the length, and then I have sometimes, depending on how anal I get about it, a lot of it depends on the pitch of the roof. If I can find a piece where I can stand this up as a diamond shape and match the pitch, which, as luck would have it, this board does. So this is actually a true 45. I can actually take a square piece of material and cut it to length, and then I get a very good glue surface to glue both roof pitches to. And I will look at cutting my support out of that one. When you start looking at gluing and bracing, you don't have to get overly picky with it, just as long as it's something that doesn't show. When you are working with basswood, Again, I keep talking about, I know I've been hammering on that all night, but basswood warps. Gluing a board along the inside edge of the wall will help straighten it up and will help stiffen it up. However, it's not enough. What you need to do is take 2 boards and glue them into an L like you're making L girder bench work. Then when the thing wants to warp, it has to fight grain in 2 different directions, and it'll help keep your walls straighter. Another good thing for, see if I've got a box of them here handy. I go down to the restaurant supply house and I'll buy coffee stirring sticks, and I don't have a box of them handy, but you can buy a box of wooden coffee stirrers, or you can swipe them by the handful from Starbucks. You can get a box of those for $4 or $5, and they come with several hundred of those wooden coffee stirrers. The kind I get from Ace Restaurant Supply here in town, as luck would have it, are 3/16 of an inch wide, which in S scale is a foot. So I've actually used them to build models with. The mine that I built and took to Houston, for example, at the Beaumont show last time, that particular model was built out of coffee stirrers. Almost all of it was. And it worked out really, really well. I was very tickled with it. But I use that a lot for interior bracing, things to that effect. When you go to put your roof on, there's a couple of different ways you can go about doing it. If you line the roof up and you want to make sure it's even, what you're going to end up with up here is a gap, because you got a flat edge and a flat edge. So what you can do is you can come in and then find you a small piece of strip wood and glue that into this gap. And so if I can hold it in place. And what that will then do is create a bit of a diamond shape and complete that up and over. I don't bother with that myself. I find that it's just not needed. You're going to come in and put a ridge cap of shingles over it anyway. So as long as you don't shove it down into the gap, it's going to hide it just fine. The other option you can do is actually overlap them a little bit. So something like this. And that will give you a true peak at the top. But what it is going to mean is your overhang is going to be, in this case, a 32nd of an inch shorter than the other one, which some guys don't like that look. If you can actually eyeball that and tell me that one's a little smaller than the other, you got better eyesight than I do. So I typically will do them this way if I'm going to do anything to it at all. When you're doing composite shingles, regular asphalt shingles, I cut those the same way as this. I cut them in the same paper, and I'll come back and lay the 3-tab out. Then I cut individual tabs out and fold them over the top to make my ridge pretty much like the real guys will do. Another thing that we'll see a lot of is squeeze out problems, especially around windows and doors and around window glass. Another reason why I like this Aleene's tacky glue is this is basically canopy glue. If you guys have ever built scale aircraft, basically Aleene's is canopy glue. The only difference is you're getting a much bigger bottle for a lot less price. A little bitty bottle about the size of the one Brooks held up a minute ago, a canopy glue will probably run you $10 or $12, where this great big bottle of Aleene's was $2.99 in Hobby Lobby. But it's essentially the same thing. It dries clear, and it's got a bit of a rubbery result to it, and you can come back and let it just, if you got a little squeeze out on your windows, let it dry, and it will peel right off your window glass with no problems. So all I did was put a couple of 3 dots along either side, and then come back over here and tack that down. With it being the tacky glue, it will hold itself. You don't need to have any type of clamping. I've seen guys go to all the trouble of taping these down and everything, but you just don't have to do that. If you do end up with a little bit of squeeze out on the inside edge, you can run your thumb along it to get it. Up underneath there, this is where these negative tweezers with a really sharp point on them come in handy, is you can come in here and use that as a bit of a scraper and scrape that back out of there, and it will clean it right up. But it does not take a lot of glue. You do not have to have glue on every single inch of every bit of the surface. It only takes a little to hold it on. Now, again, there's that balancing act. You don't want to starve the joint, but you don't want to have so much on there that you get glue all over everything. As a judge, the first thing we're looking for in any model is it square? So if I set it on a table and the first thing I'm going to do to a building is I'm going to rock it back and forth. So if I've got, let's see, where did it go? This is basically the building we're building. So the first thing I'm going to do with is I'm going to do this. I'm going to push on either corner. And you can see this one right here actually has got a little bit of a rock to it. And that's because it's not perfectly square. Now, a lot of people will take this, set it on a piece of sandpaper, and start doing this with it. That's wrong. The minute you do that, you're inevitably going to be holding it down with more pressure, probably with these two fingers than you are your thumb, and you're going to sand a bevel into it. Set it on a piece of plywood and do this with it. Sand it in a circle, and you'll end up with a perfectly flat bottom of your building. Another option is to use a piece of material called gator board. This is one of my favorites for gluing down structures. I'll build my structures on this stuff and set it down on there. And then I'll take it and I'll actually put some glue on the bottom of it. And then if y'all ever played cornhole in your tailgating, the bean bags from cornhole are a modeler's best friend because they are a formable weight that you can use to help hold your roof down while the glue dries. So I bought a bag of them over at the sporting goods store right after they had Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And oddly enough, nobody wanted a two-tone pink set of cornhole bags. So I got a set of those things on sale for next to nothing. And I've got them underneath my desk here, and I use them for roof weights. But you can come in and take a building like this one, if it's not too far out of kilter, and put a little bit of glue on the bottom of the wall, and then set a couple of those weights on it, and it will flatten the building out and flatten it to the gator board. And then you can cut the gator board, a little closer to size, and then take that and dig you a little hole in your scenery and set the whole thing down. All gator board is a kind of a woodish type of substrate with foam in the center of it. It is impervious to water. It will allow you to scenic right up to the edge of your structures with no problem. But again, you get a good flat structure that way. We actually built the SN3 layout that our club had. We used to bring to the Plano shows. We took it to the Houston Narrow Gauge Convention. We built it on some 1-inch thick pieces of this and laid track right on it, laid all our scenery right on it. This stuff is awesome. You can buy it at most places that you can buy plastics at. So there's our window and our door trim in place. It's all it's ready for is to put our doors together, put our windows in it. And what we end up with is a structure that looks a bit like that. I've gone in on this one, dug a little bit of siding out, and then put a little piece of strip wood in there so it looks like a piece of siding's fallen out, and there's one of the studs. Another thing that you can do to help dress a model out is to come in and actually put some vertical lines randomly across there, because this measures out to scale to be right at 19 feet long. I don't know what about you, but when's the last time you saw 19-foot siding boards? You don't. I don't bother to measure them, so I'm not coming in there going, okay, so that's 8 foot, and then that one's 10, and that one's 12. I just come in here and randomly, and I just make a little vertical line in there. And I will do that before I actually start painting and staining and all of that. This little piece that I dug out here, I literally just dug into it, started with a sharp nose set of these negative tweezers, and then came back in with a knife, did a little bit of digging, and then cut that little piece of strip wood to drop it in there. Anything just to show a little weathering, a little beat up, a little deferred maintenance. You can also come in, and after you cut one of these verticals, you can come underneath it, and especially with a chisel blade, you can get underneath it and then lift it. And that's a really neat effect. George Celios uses that a lot on his Franklin and South Manchester. Probably a little bit too much, to be truth be told. But you get a building that's got a lot of age to it. It's a really common thing to see. Hopefully this will get finished and you'll see this at Temple in the contest room. Well, that's really coming out yellow. I did that at a few places here and there on this model. Over here, there's several boards in amongst all of it. Got a piece lifted over here. This one's trying to show some age, but not completely beat up. So I've not popped a board out and things like that. There's one that's lifted a little bit, but this is an S scale and was a commission piece, but then me and the guy that I was building it for had a bit of a falling out, so it's mine now. So that might end up in the contest room, but there's a lot of different things you can do to weather these up, beat them up, things like that. If you're building them for your layout, let's kind of touch on that for a little bit. Depending on where it's going to go on your layout as to what you really want to do with it, okay? If it's in the back of your layout, it's up against the backdrop, you don't need to detail it out with every last little thing. Lifted boards, a lot of the weathering that we just did, things like that, you don't need it. It's too much. You'll never see it. You won't get that return on investment, basically. But if it's in the middle of the layout, depth-wise, you can do some of it. And then if it's up in the foreground, you'll want to do all of it. And that's going to do a couple of things. Model railroading is very much a smoke and mirrors kind of thing. And if the model up front is very highly detailed, and there's, this makes lights out of here. If there's a lot of good detail in the front where you can see it, and then the one behind it looks like it has almost the same amount of detail. Then in the one in the back doesn't have hardly any detail in it, but it's got just enough that your brain says, oh, that one back there has got the same amount of detail as this one up here does. And it really helps create some depth in your scenes. When you start detailing the building in the back as much as you do the one in the front, it gets lost really fast. The only place where that becomes noticeable is if you've got a camera mounted on a car and you're shoving it around the railroad and you've got it back there in the back by the backdrop. And then, yeah, it's going to stand out because you've got it. With the camera quality now on most cell phones, what the pictures you can take with this, I've been in every issue of the narrow gauge annual, the HON3 annual now, since they started it. And the last several years, all of the photographs I did for that article, I took with my cell phone. And I've got, a fairly nice Nikon setup. I can set it all up, put lights up, and really get wild with the photography end of it. But what I get off my cell phone is already print quality, and it's all right there. I can get this model to this stage, take the camera, line it up, take my shot, look at it, make sure I've got what I want. Yep, looks great, and just send that on to the editor, and he's perfectly happy with them. Yeah, he'd rather have them off the camera because then I can send him the raw image as well, and they can play with the lighting and color correction and all that a little easier. But seriously, the last at least 4, maybe 5 years, maybe longer, I've been going this other route, and they work just fine. So, but with that, you've got guys that are walking up to your layout, and instead of staying back here on the edge and taking the pictures respectfully, now you got guys reaching out with their cell phone, and usually they're only holding it with 2 fingers, and they're reaching out with the other one, and they're bip. And one of these days, somebody's going to drop one, and then I'm going to have to figure out where I'm going to hide the body. But you'll see a lot of people reach out over your layout now and take pictures. So now you have to start thinking about, okay, do I model to that? Because you have no control over what they do with that image. If you tell them up front, and I know modelers that do this, Ken Ellers up in Tulsa will tell you flat, if you should always ask, can I take pictures of your layout? And most of the guys will tell you, sure. Ken will tell you straight up, yes, you can, but if you're going to don't post them on the web, don't put them on Facebook, nothing like that. Do not put them in an article without my permission and my approval first. He wants control over what gets out there of his work. And I can't say that I blame him, because now it's reflective of your work, but it really can be down to their lack or inability thereof of photography skills. So you have to start thinking about, do I cater to that guy who leans out over my railroad and starts taking pictures? If you do, then you got to start detailing the backs of buildings and detail the deeper ones a little more and things like that. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd really hope to get this one done in time, but unfortunately I didn't get enough pre-work done to get us that far down the road. But did this in an hour and a half or so, something like that. This is definitely no bigger than this structure is. It's definitely an afternoon project for at least for me. I do know some people that have built this particular one or similar to it as a make and take, and it took them a couple of months to plow through it. But you guys just saw how fast I was able to work through that. and not really rushing anything. Yeah, I've got some weathering that I might like to touch up a little more. It's definitely not contest worthy, but for a background structure, it'll be just fine.
Cool. Well, thanks, Duane, for sharing that with us. Always learn a lot. There's always something to learn. So
yeah, well, that's the thing. And I wish the Corel piece had worked. So I was actually going to go over how you actually lay one out and design it, and we'll cover that one in Temple. If anybody wants to see how you would lay one of these things out to be laser cut or cut on a Cricut, we're going to design one live and kind of talk about a few philosophies of things and how to lay parts out a little bit. And we've covered bits and pieces of that here, but I'm actually going to show you how quick it is to draw up a little building kind of similar to this one, truth be told. Kind of go from there.
Maybe we can have you on later this year and, show that for us for people that didn't get to go to the convention,
And probably what I can look at doing with that one, since Corel doesn't seem to want to share well, is maybe draw it up and capture a few of them, put them in a slide deck, and then we can just kind of walk through the slides and show you what each drawing looks like. But it is really, really simple. If you've ever played around in PowerPoint very much, like make a clinic, for example, and know how to group and ungroup and move parts and pieces around, you can definitely get around in Corel Draw. It's not as cheap as it used to be. You used to be able to buy Corel separately for about $100, but now you got to buy the whole Corel suite, and it's about $500. So it's not as cheap a buy-in as it used to be, but it will allow you to do some things on your own. And if you're looking to have something custom cut, I do that as well. So if you've got something you've already drawn and I don't have to do any setup to it, great. If you've got something you've drawn on paper, scan it into a PDF, draw you a line on there somewhere that labeled it that is 1 inch long. And then when I import it, I'll make my 1 inch and your 1 inch match. And then I know everything's to scale and I can cut it for you. So
cool. Before we wrap this up, it's getting a little late. So, but I wanted to just give an opportunity for anybody that has any questions or anything just before we end.
It was a bit like drinking from a fire hose there. So
I'm sure we're kind of like just overload here with information. Yeah. So
I'm curious on that tape that you were using for the shingles. You said if the rows don't line up, you tear it back off. Does that row of shingles come off nice and clean, or does some of it tear off onto the roof line?
You'll have to fight with it a little bit, Joe. A lot of times what I do, if I've got one I've got to take off, is I take a chisel blade and I'll lay the flat against the row above it, and then I'll reach and slide underneath it and then cut that tape loose. Because you're overlaying each row by half, there's not as much tape on there as you might think, and you can get it to come off without too much effort, but it will take a little bit of a fight. But again, that chisel blade, or if you're using a scalpel will work real well too. The problem is typically what you end up finding is you don't realize that you've gotten offline until you're about 4 or 5 rows up, and you start looking at one of your reference lines and realizing I'm almost touching here and I'm about, 1/8 of an inch down over here. And it can be that dramatic before you catch it sometimes. So you end up having to take several rows off. So you have to be real careful with it. And if they don't put scribe lines on there for you to help keep you aligned, take you a pencil and draw them on, and then color it with your Sharpie first, then come back with your pencil and draw them on. You will still be able to see the pencil over the black Sharpie. It will create kind of a shiny spot where the Sharpie's pretty flat, and it'll give you a good reference.
No different than doing a chalk line when you're building a real roof.
Exactly. It's exactly what that's like. The roofers have an advantage. Their roofing hammers are really long. They've got their nail driving piece of it down here. They've got kind of a hatchet blade on the end of it for cutting the edges on the steel. But there's a little bolt kind of thing that sticks out on one end of it, and you literally lay the shingle up. You lay that bolt up against the bottom of the row before it's slided up, and you take that new shingle and line it up to the head of the hammer, and that perfectly spaces them. But you still want that chalk line across there to come back in and reference them as well. So it's it's one of those, I started doing that as a reference line because I'd put real roofing down for a while. I worked on a framing crew when I was in high school. So built a couple of about 75 or so houses, something like that over the course of a couple of years. So picked up a few things that I've carried on into my modeling that way. But that tape's really cool. I mean, it comes in a pretty nondescript box. There's 3M transfer tape, number 987, and there are 12 rolls of it in the box. And I want to say it was either 35 or 45 bucks for the box.
That's the same tape we used when we did the depot clinic, isn't it?
It is the exact same tape we used. I actually started using transfer tape. We had a gentleman over here named Bartholomew that somehow or another, I don't know if he worked at TI or he knew people that worked at TI or whatever, but he got some stuff called Kapton tape. And they use that for taping down electronic components and missiles and all kinds of stuff. And it's a double-sided, real thin, uber sticky kind of stuff, and very pricey per roll. But this stuff works the same way.
Cool. Well, I want to. John reminded me that we should take a group photo here. So if you have a camera and want to say hi, do this, and we'll send it out in our newsletter next month. So here we go. Got to get this straight here. All right. There we go.
Can't you take a screenshot from Zoom?
I did. I have the camera here just to be obvious that I was taking a picture. No, I did a screenshot though. So cool.
And Brooks, something else I'll do for you too. I have an advantage in that I'm in IT, so I work from home.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm at work, I'm right here.
Yeah.
So cool. This is my work setup. So when I'm on conference calls and things like that, and it's kind of running long or whatever, I've got a job running and nothing else to do. The chair pivots to the right and I go tinker on something for a little bit. I'll spend a little bit of time and finish this one up, and I'll send you some pictures to send out in the newsletter.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm always looking for stuff to send out, to people. So,
yep.
Cool. Well, it's getting late. I need to get going, guys. So I'm gonna. Usually, I'll leave it open for people to chit chat, and I probably can elect a admin here to take that over if y'all want to hang around and talk for a while. So, but I want to thank everybody for coming. Reminder: NMRAX is this weekend, so look for that on YouTube. And then Temple and Regional Convention in Temple's coming up soon. Next meeting is going to be on make sure I got the date right, May 16th, and we're going to have Greg McComas present his little bedroom size layout, Michigan Interstate. I've operated on that layout, and it's a real fun layout to be on, and he's got modern mainline operation packed into a small average sized bedroom, and actually does freight line train, long mainline trains through there. So pretty amazing deal. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming, and we'll see you next month.
Take care, man.
Good all.